I was doing a keynote talk yesterday, and I was talking about some of my entrepreneurial exploits as a child, and I'd taken my daughter
Wasn't it
to this.
selling tattoos? I think I saw.
Yeah, that's right. So we had loads. The tattoo one was, I mean, this is cringe. Like, we were about 11 years old. We used to draw on our neighbours' hands and like put like some piece of paper over the top and go, "That's 50 pence." We did things where we like bought penny chews and stretched them and sold them for 2 pence. We used to do garage sales, car washing. So and it was always me that was the instigator of those things.
So
So
when you said that you weren't
I
entrepreneurial,
know, maybe I was, because I look back on those things now with a smile, and it was super fun. I wanted to be a fashion buyer. That was why I did that, and then found out you had to move to London, so then didn't do it. So, but I ended up working in a nightclub in Leeds, and I absolutely loved that job. But it meant that I was up till 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. I always had lectures at 9, which I never went to. So I literally did the bare minimum to scrape through. So it was only so when I got into my late 20s and went back to uni and did a master's that was sponsored by my employer at the time, and then now doing a PhD that I am paying for, that I take it seriously. And education is such a privilege, and it's a gift, and I really value it now in a way that I didn't when I was younger. So at that point, I was around about 30, and I had I got married around about then, and then I had my daughter. I decided to be brave. I don't think I thought it was being brave at the time. It was just the sensible option was to leave. We were like, hey, let's just set up this business. I look back and I think, bloody hell, that was a bit bonkers, really doing
with
that.
a child, that's mental.
With a child, yeah, it was a bit bonkers, but things worked out.
But the funny thing is that it's what I love. So before we came on the call, I was telling Sophie about some stresses that I've got at the moment. Anyway, but there's a beauty in the naivety of what you don't know. Does that make sense? And it's because of that you can throw yourself into something. You're like, it'll be fine.
Well, this is the thing, Steve. I think if I'd known some of the challenges that I would have even within a year of making that decision, would I have made that decision? Probably not. And then literally within that first 6 months, I got divorced. So again, it's that whole look around when things happen, because if that had happened earlier, I would have had to have got a job. Mm-hmm. I knew I had to make it work. And that was you've seen my TEDx, like it was a really crappy time in my life, because you're dealing with all the fallout of getting divorced, which is pretty rubbish. Don't recommend it, but
I'll try not to.
Well, maybe I do actually. It depends what situation you're in. I don't regret it, but it's pretty brutal. So you're going through sorting all of your finances, your life out. Got a kid. I've become a single parent to a 2-year-old. That's not something that I would have chosen to do. And then a new business. So it's juggling all these things. And I remember being in the spare room in my old house thinking, this is really like proper rock bottom stuff here. Like I couldn't afford my house. I was self-employed, so I didn't have that income to pay for the mortgage. So my poor dad had to lie to his employer, into my mortgage company rather, to say he was going to work till he was 75 so I could get him to go on the mortgage, because he was old. My mortgage went up because the term reduced. So financially, it was a pretty challenging time, and emotionally, it was a pretty challenging time. But I am a mostly positive person, and I thought, you know what, this is really crap, but this is as crap as it gets, right? The only way is up. 2 years, I had this thing 2 years in my head. I'm just going to work really hard and get myself out of this hole, and that's all I can concentrate on, is keeping my child alive, keeping the business alive, and keeping it growing. And that was it. Look back, I just think, God, what was I thinking? But it's that thing, your back's against the wall. You've got to make things happen, and as an entrepreneur, you've got to be resourceful, and you've got to be creative, and you've got to go out there and win stuff, because it doesn't just happen. It got advertised, and I was like, I have to apply for this. This is so me. And then I went through this quite long recruitment process and got offered the role. Obviously, it is a voluntary role, and it does take up quite a lot of my time, but I absolutely love it. I get to work in a charity that is aligned to, my own sort of values and things that are important to me. And I really am a big fan of supporting women and people in business. It's not just about women, but I do have, hold that close. And I think the impact that we're having across the region is massive. So seeing that impact that we're having, where it's really a life-changing service for some of those women that might have been out of work and had pretty horrific home circumstances to lead them to that position. So it's that impact. But, from a personal perspective, I get to work with, we've got a fantastic team there. We have a board of, I think there's 9 of us on the board at the moment. And that is a proper kick-ass board. Like they are they're all women that, you know, have very different backgrounds. They all have a different area of responsibility within the board. We have really dynamic, challenging, exciting, creative, all these wonderful things in our board meetings. So I come out bouncing out of there thinking, we've come up with these great ideas for the charity, but actually I feel like they've filled up my own tank of energy with their enthusiasm and their ideas. So it's a privilege to hold that role, and, you know, hope I have it for a long time. When you hear some of the women, you know, that we see have come from really abusive relationships, very challenging circumstances, where they've perhaps had to be a carer for somebody, they've been out of work usually for quite a long time, and their confidence is low. And when your confidence is low and you've been out of work, you know, even coming into the centre can be quite an overwhelming thing for them. And when you're in a dark place in your life, your clothes and your appearance usually tends to feature quite low on your priority list. So for us to just see the difference, and we've got fantastic volunteers that style the clients that come to see us, and you see them come out of the changing room and they are just like, you know, 10 feet tall, just from, you know, and we have the most beautiful clothes. We have brand partnerships with some amazing, really fancy top end designer brands. They come out looking amazing. They've got the accessories, the clothes, everything. And it just lifts them immediately. So therefore, immediately in their head, you know, they feel like they can compete. They know that they're going to look the part, and get the interview coaching as well, which supports that. So
That's awesome.
it is life changing.